So welcome everybody, and we're going to really power through. So I have an alternative title for this. It was really funny when I was doing this at 11 o'clock last night, but it may fall totally flat in the room. I'll get into that a little bit more later on. How many people are here because AI is in the title of this session? Be honest. All right. I'll try not to disappoint. First of all, Brad's hiding in the front here, so Brad's going to be my support team here a little later on when we get into some of the conversations, some of the questions, specifically around AI. I'm Wayne. You guys can read that. You'll get the PowerPoint. I did the one thing that I don't like doing. There's a lot of words in this PowerPoint. I am going to be moving through quickly because I want to get to the reason everybody raised their hand, the AI part. But there's some foundational things that we want to cover off. So the agenda is, as you see here, the concept of why, what is it that we're doing, the approach we took, some initial observations, and then starting with the data, and then we'll get to the AI. So I'm talking fast because there's too many slides, but I will be skimming, and I promise you, you can read along later on it. Okay, the why. Everybody, I think, in the room here pretty much knows the why. Been a fairly well-publicized conversation for quite a while now about portfolio reduction. So the why for us as an organization, Horizant, was we work with a number of federal departments, with Government of Canada data, and we said, hey, what if we took all of that data and we started kind of combining it and seeing what we could figure out? That was the start. And now what we're going to share is some of the things that we found in that, but also the journey towards the concept of using AI or large language models to help do the work that everybody in the room here is trying to get to. So this is a rhetorical question. These are questions that we get asked all the time. These are questions that I'm guessing most of you, again, show of hands, how many of you have thought about at least one of these questions in the past 30 days or 3 years or something like that, right? So pretty much the focal point of the work that we've been doing in the background. So the next too many slides, I'm going to go through really quickly, because it's the foundational stuff that gets us to the conversation around the AI. And I use AI in a air quotations concept because there's a lot of aspects to it, and that's why Brad's here, because you can ask questions I'm not going to be able to answer. But we want to get through what we did, what we look at, and how we approach things from this large data set, and how we arrive at an AI thing. So, sorry, back one, understanding, what is the definition of the 50% reductions or efficiencies that we're doing? Really nailing that down as a starting point is where we look at in this example of what we want to do. There's examples here of good and bad efficiency. I promise I will not read the slides. But again, the concept is, are we sure, are we clear what we're trying to achieve in the real property, the crowned assets reductions? And there are different facets to it, so making sure that we understand these definitions. Everybody in the room probably is, again, familiar with this. There's certain assets that just have to be kept. There's special purpose spaces, there's warehouses, there's all kinds of things that aren't part of this reduction, so we have to make sure that that data does not alter the decisions that we're making. It doesn't skew the results that we're trying to drive to. Potential consolidation candidates. Again, you can see the types here, the modern shared hubs, underutilized apartment-only buildings, things that we're all experiencing in the federal real property world today, and understanding those. I think you're going to see as we go through this is meant as a collaborative conversation. What we come out of today with is this concept of, what do we do next? How do we get there? There's departmentally a view on this, and then there's, of course, enterprise, the idea of government as a whole approach to doing that. Okay, I'm going to keep powering because there's, again, too many slides to go through. So again, looking at the decision logic, we're going to get into the idea of data here in a second because that's ultimately key. I'm not going to, beat it again and again, but if you don't have either the right data, if you're not looking at the right data, if your data is not formatted correctly, I don't care how many different versions of AI you put on it, we all know the saying, right? Everybody want to repeat after me? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So we're all familiar with that, and that's going to be part of this. That's why I'm going through this, is when I meet somebody and they go, are you guys doing AI yet? And I'm going, yes. Are you ready for it? That's really the conversation we're having here today. Again, stuff that many of you are familiar with. I'm not trying to teach you something new here. I'm just trying to reinforce the idea of the steps that we go through when we look at data and the steps that we've been going through with the consolidation of a bunch of data sets that we've been working on. Government-wide approach. So this is an enterprise view. It doesn't mean that it doesn't translate into departmental, but it's still starting at a broad stroke and trying to understand how we impact things on a grand scale. And then distill it down into these manageable chunks, right? It's that how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? Those types of approaches to that. My colleague Ian, who's much younger than me, is going, I've never heard that saying before. It's clearly, I'm dating myself, but we'll keep moving. We have this had a bit of an internal competition about, what do we call this? And it came up with Control-Alt-Unify, a bit of a play on the Control-Alt-Delete, and this idea of IT and RP. So how many people in the room are IT, like really, truly IT-focused folks? Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we see that as a problem in real property? How many people see that as a problem in real property? Everybody should be putting their hand up. I don't care. Just saying. So this is, again, this idea of these are observations. So what we did is we combined a bunch of data. This is just a portion of the things that we've seen. So this is Government of Canada data that we've combined and mashed together. We even went and got DFRP data that's online and pulled it in just to kind of run a comparison and look at that. So again, I'm not going to read off these things, but these are just things around observations, opportunities when it comes to space utilization, some of the condition information, asset condition, cost definition and tracking. So what we're seeing is a common theme around inconsistencies, right? So if you're going to go on to and use ChatGPT to ask a certain large language model something, you might get an answer that is skewed based on either good or bad data. Am I right, Brad? I'm right. Thank you, Brad. I'm glad he said yes. So again, the other one is missing data. Now again, the data set that we took isn't like we went and got every single data source across the Government of Canada, but this is again that idea of this ITRP thing. We have silos of information in real property. We have other information that is considered IT, but it's asset registry, it's financial information. How many people consider, this is a tricky question, I'm going to ask it anyways. How many people consider SAP, whatever version you have, to be a true real property solution? Show of hands. It's okay, I'm not judging, I'm just asking how many people feel that that's a true RP. For the gentleman at the back that raised his hand and said he was from IT, do you view SAP as an IT solution? Okay. Okay, so is that a qualified yes? Not really. But I'm just saying that again, sorry to pick on you. I'm just saying that there's the disparity between this idea of how systems are viewed in the Government of Canada and how they're supported, but also how they're integrated, or in this case, how they're not integrated. So when we talk about missing data, it's because there are other data sources and we're not necessarily looking at it horizontally and tying it in. Okay, this gets even more into the weeds, so I'm going to go even faster. And I promise you when you read this, it'll make more sense. But when you start looking at the idea is, what data is needed to make these decisions, this idea of the purpose, typical source that you're getting it from, an arbitrary look at the data maturity in the federal space, and the idea of the cost to maintain that. So there's a bunch of categories here, and I'm going to click through. There's 3 of these, but you'll see data that you probably deal with directly. You probably see data here that you wish you had access to that would allow you to make more informed decisions on what you do day to day. And then, of course, there's data that you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And that's okay. That's why we're having this dialogue here, is to start talking about all these different pieces. Yeah, okay. So actually I lied. There were 5 slides of data. So I went through that quick. Just in case you're counting, we're getting to number 11 very quickly, and then we'll move on to other things. So once we understand the data sets that we're talking about, we want to move from the idea of data into the idea of analysis or optimization. And that's, again, when we start leaning into different tools, whether that's using a Power BI and a data warehouse to access a bunch of different data sets, or whether that's using some sort of large language model and aiming it at your data and asking questions so that you can get faster, better, more cohesive answers. That's really what we're talking about now. And then when we start talking about the core inputs for optimization, I've got 6 of them on screen here right now. Again, do these resonate? Do you see these as core inputs for making decisions on optimization? Your cost, your space, your timelines, your risk, strategic alignment, sustainability. How many people here Labs Canada, right? Strategic alignment. We have labs. We got to keep labs, right? It's that consistency of what you need. Totally arbitrated weights here. Don't judge me on how I put weights on the different categories, but now that helps inform what is the mandate that you've been given, either departmentally or as a government as a whole, and how you start making decisions on your portfolio. Changes, reductions, integration, whatever term you want to put to that. Moving into the optimization, right? And now we're starting to get into the stuff everybody raised their hands for, the side of AI and what we get there. And most importantly, and we see a lot of this in conversation here at RPIC, this idea of, can you actually support the decisions that the recommendations that you're making? Is it data-based decisions, right? Are they informed decisions around that? So, when you start having to make significant changes to your portfolio, are they based on a portion of data, or are they based on the holistic view of what is available to you? Okay. Thanks for bearing with me on that, and I apologize for clicking through that so quickly, but the main message of that, if there's a takeaway on that, is that you're understanding the steps that we're going through to get to the idea of analyzing data. I'm going to give you a non-AI example here, and then we're going to get into a whole bunch of examples of the AI. Okay, so pretty straightforward, right? How much time, how much space you need for full-time, based on number of employees, area requirements. All of these things, again, are probably familiar to many of you around that. So what are we trying to drive to? This is an example of a report, and apologies for anybody in the back of the room that might not see it, but the first one at the top is 1 day return to office. The bottom is 5 days return to office. I'm not advocating for anything on that. I don't want to get shot. I'm simply showing this as an example of the use of data to make an informed decision, right? I think most people would say to me, the 5 day isn't representative, because the 5 days should show that there's no yellow bar left. It's, we're over allocated now. There's not enough space left to have a 5 day return to office. So this is just one view of data of an overall subset of the Government of Canada data, but you start seeing the type of analysis that we can start driving out of existing data that's already in play around the Government of Canada. And you're going to have lots of questions on that. Here's a different hybrid work saga, if you will. Andrew from Innerspace was supposed to be here anyways. He wasn't able to be. He's provided me with some data sets. So Innerspace is a Canadian company that does Wi-Fi enabled utilization. There's a lot. I'm oversimplifying. If Andrew was here, he'd kill me for that simple explanation. But based on the clients that they work with, here's some data points that they have around hybrid work. And so again, this goes back to that slide that talked about missing data and what elements are we doing, right? We might have booking information. We might have a badge swipe, but are we tracking how somebody is actually interacting with the space, how they're moving around the space, what kind of space they're using? And again, it isn't about accountability of the person, it's accountability of the space that we own and operate and how we better make use of that space. That's the message around all of these data sets that we're trying to bring together and make decisions on. So that's, again, a couple of quick examples. Okay, I'm going to take a breath now. Now we've gotten to the interesting part, the AI part. I'll slow down and we'll kind of walk through some examples of the applying AI to the enterprise. And this is the part where I hope people are putting questions in. I welcome early, I'm going to throw Sonia off here. As we go through this, if you want to run up to the mic and ask a question about something, please do so. Put it in the app. Sonia will flag me if there's something pertinent to what's going on that. But I'm going to run through a whole bunch of examples of AI. Some of them are going to get more and more detailed. Some of them are going to apply government-wide, and some of them are going to apply departmentally. And some will apply to both. Okay, so portfolio optimization, very straightforward, right? It's the idea of taking a bunch of the information and managing how do we optimize the portfolio. Pretty self-explanatory. An interesting one is the comparative benchmarking. Whether you're leasing space or occupying space, are you tracking the cost on the space? Are you able to compare that cost of your building space to a different department's building space? Why is it more money in one place versus the other? You have a lease that's coming due, and you're paying whatever per square meter. Do you get rid of that space, or is that space cheaper than occupying, co-locating in a space that a department has available? These are all questions that again, you start applying tools like AI to, where you can now go across. If you're asking the right question to the right set of data, you can now start pulling that information out and getting to know before your lease comes due, before the month before your lease is due, you can actually plan 2 or 3 years ahead and figure out where you're going to relocate or whether you're going to renew that lease. Policy compliance. Intelligence-based management, again, the idea of how many people do track badge swipes? Everybody puts their hand up. I don't mean it in terms of real property, I just mean you're all swiping in, right, to get into a building. No, not everybody. See, I appreciate the honesty here that I don't know everything. So for those that are doing badge swipes, the question is, how are you using the badge swipes to inform what's going on in the building? Somebody's then going to tell me, well, we don't swipe out, so we don't know the coming and going and how long somebody is in the space. So there's different elements to data integration. I'm just using those as examples of how do we integrate data and how do we manage the different sets of data to make, again, a more fully informed decision. Okay, this is where we get a little more detailed and we start looking at this idea of the deterministic and LLM part. I need you, Brad. I need you to help me.
I can try. Can you guys hear me okay? Hi, I'm Brad. So just to give full credit, Wayne developed all these slides, but I really like the way he separated the deterministic from LLM. So as you guys said, garbage in, garbage out. So you're not going to have any good results with AI if you don't have good data. Where AI can be, and LLMs in particular, I'm just going to give it a little definite. LLMs are obviously the hot thing. ChatGPT, it's a subset of AI. So what we're really talking about is LLMs, but I think you should, whenever you hear that, you should just think AI, because it won't be pure ChatGPT, it won't be pure LLM tech, but it'll be the general family of AI, which includes a lot of different aspects. But where it's really powerful is in its ability to synthesize data, typically unstructured natural language based. So think your PDFs, your Word docs, your email, things that are, we call it the data between the databases. You know, you have your databases, that data needs to be good in order to get good results, but you have conversations, you have email, you have chat. That's where LLMs really excel. The other thing is it's really very good at determining patterns. So it's a statistical model, and why it seems so magical is because we're all human, we're all doing the same kind of work, and the reality is there's only so many ways to do it, and you often end up in the same place. So it's a short circuit to getting to a good result. And that's really when Wayne talks about the LLM part, that's really where you're getting your workforce multiplier. It's becoming more efficient in the workplace and getting better results. It's not a panacea. It's not an instant result, but it is a step change in technology. And as the government has stated, we want to incorporate it across government. So this is a great topic, for a very timely topic.
Yeah, thanks. Hang on to that mic, because I'll call you again. And just, you know, again, I did very quickly skim the backgrounds, but, you know, Brad comes from a career in the government, you know, working at CSE and implementing a lot of security and different things like that. Again, I'm not doing it justice, but at Title Point, they're combining the idea of security and the idea of AI together. So that's kind of what we've wanted to do here, is bring some, you know, we would have had Andrew from Innerspace here, and Title Point and Horizant. You know, as Canadian companies, we kind of see the value, what we can bring to the table. I've had conversations, as an example, with ThinkOn, if you're familiar with ThinkOn, and the idea of sovereign databases, and the idea of, you know, how we bring all of those things together to deliver better value to the federal real property. Question from the front here, and I'll repeat your question.
What's LLM?
Large language model. The question was, what is LLM? Large language model on that. And the follow-on question is, what's a large language model? Is that your follow-on question? That's where I'm going to point to Brad, and Brad's going to help me out here.
Super quick. So you guys have all heard of ChatGPT. So at the end of the day, think of it as, we used to talk, when Google first came out, Google search, we used to talk about semantic web. So the idea that searches are repetitive and all the information out there is only as valuable as the context. So what am I searching for, and how does it relate to other things I care about? LLM tech is like a quantum leap ahead in that kind of semantic relevance. So it's a statistical analysis of, so when you hear model, it's, in this case, these foundational models like ChatGPT are the internet. So all the publicly available information that they can analyze. And it's a statistical analysis. So basically what it does is it really gets very efficient at giving context, relevant answers to your questions. And it's also creative. It can, and this is where you get into the pros and cons, it can actually create new works based on your question. So you can ask it to, you know, write me a CV or write me a paper. The mileage varies, but what I can tell you, we've been operating for about a year. ChatGPT's been out for almost 3 years, 2.5 years. The quality of the results is just getting better and better and better. And if you're using this tech, you realize that it's hard to imagine how good it's going to get. So think of it as just a really, really advanced analysis of all the public information out there available on the internet would be
Yeah.
the way to think about it.
Thanks, Brad. And it's a great question. And, sometimes we lose sight of the idea of either acronyms or the technology and how fast it's moving. And we use terms that I don't understand. And so it's good to stop and kind of explain that. But I think one of the things that we see in, again, the general AI side of things is the exercise that we went through, right? The exercise that we went through at Horizon was taking, a data mashup, taking a bunch of data and putting it into a centralized database. There's an appendix on here I won't go into with you, but it talks about little things that we found. But in that is also tools, AI tools that are being used. These are very functional, user-based examples, but in a parallel universe, we're using AI to improve bringing the data together, cleaning the data, doing a bunch of different things so that there's kind of two trains of progress going on. One is improving the data that we need for this, and then improving the analysis of the data. Hopefully that makes sense, but I think that's kind of the idea. So I'm going to keep going through these examples. Again, I keep encouraging you to ask any questions. I'm not sure if anybody's asked a question.
There are some questions coming in. Do you want to do them at the end or now?
I'd love them right now.
Love them right now. Okay. 2 more questions. Here's the first one from Jonathan. On the subject of implementation, are we considering going straight to the LLM development and integration, or is a smaller, more local approach being developed?
Well, that's a great question and a great collaborative question, right? The idea of the approach, the last slide in here is let's talk about it, right? The idea is what is the right approach, right? If the government of Canada, as an example, says, no, let's get it all done and let's do it all at the same time, then that's the way we're going to go. If there's a department that says, you know what, we're ready to do it now, let's work on that and do something right now, then we can certainly. I think the concept is to prototype something. The concept of what we've started building is a prototype, but we need the feedback. We need the collaboration. I think that's really Brad, did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think in my experience, it's always easier to start small and build out. These large projects tend to have mixed results, let's just say.
Yeah, they can drag on. So go ahead, Sonia, another question.
And I was going to say there's a bit of capacity building in there too. You need to develop your own skills as these are developing, so starting small makes sense just from the human perspective. Okay, another question. Are we referring to taking the data we have and putting it into an LLM about adding an AI component to an existing database, or about creating new data systems in which there is an AI integration?
Again, I think the question of whether you use existing or build new is dependent on the objective of the project, right? I think that there's existing data that's available right now in a variety of different sources. If that means we're creating and again, I'm not an IT expert, but if you're creating a data warehouse and you're bringing that into a data warehouse, a data lake, whatever, and then using that, I think that's viable. But I do know, and Brad, you can make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here, is that, an LLM can be pointed at multiple data sources and go and query across. Am I correct in that way of explaining it, or am getting it a bit wrong?
Maybe I'll just give you the 60-second version. So the way the state of the tech is today is you have foundational models. So these are your Geminis, your Copilots, your ChatGPTs. Those are very expensive to train. They're billions of dollars, and so there's only going to be a handful of those. But that's why they're called foundational model. That's your foundation. What companies like ours are doing, so AI application companies, is we're using those and then applying the domain-specific data. So in this case, real property data could be all kinds of other sources. You can use your imagination, what kind of data would be relevant, and Wayne has gone through a lot of different sources here to helping you make your decisions. And what we call those is ontologies, or sometimes you'll hear them referred to as mini models. So the idea is there's going to be millions of these mini models. So there would be potentially for the government of Canada, or just real property in general, there would be mini models. The benefit of that, it goes back to this semantic meaning, is because two organizations may call the same piece of data two different things, but where the models are powerful is they're able to infer the relationship. And so then from a human interaction perspective, it's way more powerful. And then there's this other concept called tools. So the best way I can describe that is think about Excel. Everybody uses Excel. Large language models are terrible at math right now. They're getting better, but they're not really designed for that. But Excel would be a tool where a large language model could go out and call Excel to do some calculation and then take the results and incorporate those into its analysis. And so you're going to have foundational models, domain-specific models, and tools. And then that's going to form the basis for kind of the future of software development. And the next step, you're going to hear a lot about agentic AI. And that's just a fancy way to say you're going to automate it, and they're all going to talk to one another. And so it's going to become much easier to gain access to new tools and new information.
Perfect. Thank you, Brad. There'll be 3 more questions in the online to build on what he just said, but it was a great explanation on that. Okay, let's keep kind of going through, and let me know if
there's more questions. Okay. Once you start getting into the questions, people are just having lots of thoughts and ideas here. So next one is, how are we addressing the security concerns of LLMs when a significant portion of work where they can be of significant value is secret clearance level?
Hello, Brad.
Okay. So, so I spent 20 years at CSC, so security is definitely near and dear to my heart. And as Wayne said, that's what we're focusing on at Title Point. This is a many-layered onion, okay? And what I like about the way Wayne's presenting it is you have to start somewhere, right? So you start, so he talks about constraints, security being one of the constraints. We're not going to fix everything and all in one go, but if you start identifying, so to begin with, LLMs by default are not secure per se, but remember, Government of Canada is on Microsoft Azure. We already trust that to do pretty much all of our data management, and they're one of the main leaders in the AI space. So it's not really a big leap, and they're providing, so the entities in government that care about security are in discussions with companies like Microsoft to provide that secure foundational layer. But it is an issue. It's a huge issue. There's 2 things, two last notes. We probably overclassify a lot of information. So that would be one approach. And the other thing is, I think the Government of Canada, in my experience, so I've been at this 30 years. I've been out of government for 10. We've come a long way. So just in the last 10, 15 years, we've come a long way about what's accessible. So I think that will continue, but it's a great question. There's no easy answer to that one.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Brad.
Oh, we'd have another question, but it's related to that.
I'm going to do a couple more slides.
Okay.
And then we'll come right back to that, just so we keep moving, but I'm not going to forget that. Okay, another, again, departmentally applying AI, so in lease portfolio, I was going to say, I was going to ask a question, but people probably don't want to raise their hand. How many people have missed a lease renewal deadline, right? Don't raise your hands. I don't want to know. But again, even using simple tools to not simple tools, but powerful tools to kind of start staying ahead of that and determining, and then tying that back into that square meter cost discussion that we had. It can tie into a bunch of other factors around the quality of the space, location of the space, how much space is being used in different locations, right? We're now starting to marry a bunch of different data sets to make those decisions. Energy and sustainability, again, self-explanatory here around that is what's going on. And then suggesting interventions, doing things like looking at occupancy and what are we doing, right? Back in the, not that I want to flash back to it, back in COVID days, right, the grocery stores were doing exactly this with the air handler units. You may not have known that, but what they were doing is looking at when they had the highest traffic coming into their stores and having their air handler units be more active, and then at night be more dormant. And that was, again, a cost saver. It was also a maintenance, the idea of how long they could make it last. And so tying different data sets into it. I know it sounds logical, and I'm oversimplifying, but the point is that that's part of the thing. Capital planning, budget forecasting. Obviously, what's going to be top of mind to most organizations, departments, all the way through to the central agencies is this idea of what are our buildings costing us. We already know what the deferred maintenance is looking like and how long we're hanging on to buildings, how long it takes to get rid of them. So now starting to look at different layers of that data set. Back to questions, Sonia.
Okay, we were just talking about overclassifying. This is a similar thing. We're trying to implement such an approach, but are limited because of the right to privacy. Any suggestions on dealing with this roadblock?
It's a really good question, and probably a bigger one than we can tackle here in terms of right to privacy. I'll give you an oversimplified version of that, right, in terms of just the idea of hybrid work and desk booking. There's certain departments that allow their colleagues to see where somebody else is booked, right, because they want to go sit beside them, and then other departments don't allow it. So there's clearly not a uniform policy around that, just same way as using sensors to track utilization, right? There's certain views on that's, Big Brother watching, and we don't want to allow that, versus the idea that all we're really trying to do, to be honest, is just understand better utilization of the building and maximizing that usage. So that's a non-answer, but a great question, and I'm not sure that I'm equipped to fully answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think culture is changing a little bit on that too, like what we find acceptable, but there are laws related to this. Okay, we have another question from Jonathan. Is data sovereignty a concern? Is there an identified risk of using a non-foundational model both for accuracy and security?
Clearly, if anybody is, not living in a cave, right, the data sovereignty has been a hot topic. We've had conversations with ThinkOn, and there's a couple of other companies that have a very strong, narrative around the data sovereignty. So I think the answer is yes, that data sovereignty is important. Again, way above my pay grade is the question of, can the Government of Canada move off of a Microsoft platform and, counteract the Cloud Act and all of these things that come into play? Maybe.
Yeah, one of these crunchy problems that we're going to have to solve.
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation around that, and it starts veering into the Buy Canadian conversation and a whole bunch of others. Another question?
That's all for now.
That's all for now. Awesome. We're almost there. Hang on.
More content to get people thinking.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys hanging in here on so much text on screen. When you, an hour from now, when you're looking at this and reading it and really studying it, not quite, right? Tomorrow, next week, okay. Then you'll.
By the way, Wayne, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, thank you. Again, national space utilization benchmarking. Right now, there's certainly data available on departmentally what's going on. The debate around the accuracy of that, of course, is how you're tracking actual utilization. But how do we now start looking at that and start implementing that in terms of regional variances and regional considerations, and starting to ask the data the right kind of question to make sure that we're not piling, you know, downtown Ottawa, downtown Gatineau into the same conversation as some remote location, and making sure we see where that might play in. Preventive maintenance and asset life cycle, obviously maintaining, fitting up, fixing, replacing is front and center with when we look at all the numbers that have been shared around the building. So applying AI to that to kind of look at, can we extend the life of an asset? Can we extend the life of a building based on data sets? Run it comparatively to other buildings. What have we done in another building that has made the building either reduce cost or last another 10 years? We're almost at the end, I promise.
And I do have one question, so
another
give us
question.
some
Let's
time.
do the question.
Do the question?
Yep.
Okay. So this is going to be an interesting one for the private sector. Maybe you can help us out. In the current economical landscape, how will the public sector get the R&D money at this pivotal time for AI when we're being asked to cut? Right? That's kind of where we're at.
Man, I'm going to skip to the end. Let's save that question to the end. Hang on, I'll get there. I'm almost there. Energy efficiency, sustainability. You can see there's tons of examples. I can keep clicking through, and you're going to see kind of a repeat of a bunch of things. And I'm going to move because I know we've got like a minute left. So there's tons of use cases around this. And there we go. I got the yellow sign. If I had better eyes, I'd know what that says, but I know it's near the end. So there's the answer to the question, which is this idea of consultation, collaboration, prototyping, right? When people say, hey, we're cutting back, we don't have the money, how do we do this? There's a lot of companies, a couple of them are here today, one couldn't be here today, that are very interested in the feedback, in the conversation. We ran this data model, data mashup. Nobody's paying us to do that. And I'm not looking for, hey, applause or anything. The reality is we've been doing the real property data stuff for 30 years. There's knowledge there that we want to collaborate on and do that. So I think the answer is through collaboration. Thank you.